For 18 years she was missing. Not presumed dead, not forgotten, just gone. Her name was J.C. Dugard, and when she vanished, she was 11 years old. The day she disappeared started like any other school morning. A suburban street, a backpack heavy with books, her mother walking her to the bus stop because J.C. was still young enough that crossing the street alone felt like too much. The bus stop was only a few yards from their driveway. They didn't know that distance would matter. A car slowed as it approached them. A white sedan, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of vehicle your eyes slide over without stopping. A man leaned out of the window and asked for directions. That moment, that brief pause, was all it took. The door opened, hands reached out. J.C. screamed. Her mother tried to hold on, but the man was stronger, faster, prepared. J.C. was pulled into the car and they sped away, tires screaming, leaving her mother standing in the street with her arms still outstretched, holding nothing. The search began immediately. Roadblocks, helicopters, dogs, posters. Every parent in the area checked their locks twice that night. But J.C. didn't vanish into wilderness. She didn't disappear across state lines. She was taken to a place no one thought to look, a backyard. Philip Garrido drove J.C. to his home, a modest house in a residential neighborhood. He didn't hide her in a distant cabin or an underground bunker. He hid her behind a fence, literally. In the backyard, hidden behind tall wooden fencing and overgrown foliage, Garrido constructed a concealed area, sheds, makeshift structures, tents within enclosures. From the street, the house looked ordinary. Neighbors waved. Children rode bikes past the driveway. No one imagined that a missing child was being held just a few yards away, invisible behind routine. The early days were the worst. J.C. screamed. She fought. She cried for her mother until her throat hurt. Garrido used fear, confusion, and isolation. He told her no one was looking for her. He told her the world had moved on. He told her lies until they became the only version of reality she had access to. And over time, because time is the most powerful weapon in captivity, something else happened. J.C. adapted, not because she accepted what was happening, but because survival demanded it. She learned when to speak and when to stay silent. She learned how Garrido's mood shifted. She learned the boundaries of punishment. She learned how to disappear without escaping. Years passed, then more. J.C. grew from a child into a teenager, then into a woman, all within the same hidden space. Seasons changed, presidents changed, technology evolved. She watched the world move forward from the inside of a cage disguised as a backyard. At times, Garrido allowed her limited movement. He took her out in public occasionally, presenting her as part of his family, spinning stories, controlling conversations. J.C. learned to keep her eyes down. She learned not to react. She learned that panic was dangerous. This is something survivors talk about later. How captivity doesn't always look like chains. Sometimes it looks like compliance, because compliance keeps you alive. For 18 years, J.C. waited, not passively, patiently. She memorized routes, she memorized doors, she memorized the way freedom looked from the inside. And then, one day, something changed. In 2009, Garrido brought J.C., now 29, to a campus event at the University of California, Berkeley. He claimed to have a religious message to share. He brought his daughters with him. The behavior was strange enough that campus police noticed. An officer approached Garrido, asked questions, listened, watched, and then something subtle happened. JC spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically. She didn't scream. She answered questions calmly, too calmly. The officer noticed that Garrido kept interrupting her, correcting her, guiding her words. The officer separated them, and in that separation, that small, quiet moment, JC told the truth. Her name, her age, her story. It wasn't an escape in the traditional sense. She didn't run barefoot into the street. She didn't break a window or overpower her captor. She waited until someone noticed something didn't fit. And when the moment finally arrived, she stepped through it. Police verified her identity. DNA confirmed it. 18 years after she vanished, JC Dugard was found alive. The backyard was searched, the hidden structures dismantled. The impossible proximity became horrifyingly clear. She had been there the entire time, in a place everyone passed, in a place no one questioned. When JC spoke later about her captivity, she said something that reframed everything. She said she survived by creating a world inside her head, a place Garrido couldn't touch, a place where time didn't erase her. Because captivity doesn't always end with escape. Sometimes it ends with endurance. And the reason this story matters, the reason it belongs in a collection of disappearances where people were found alive, is because it teaches a hard truth. JC didn't survive because someone burst through the fence. She survived because she stayed alive long enough for the world to notice a crack. She survived because she didn't give up during years when escape wasn't possible. And when the opportunity finally came, she took it. Quietly, carefully, decisively. 18 years missing. Found not because the place was discovered, but because she was still there to be discovered. For 7 years, everyone believed he was gone. Not hidden, not captive. Gone. His name was Stephen Stainer, and when he disappeared in 1972, he was 7 years old. He vanished from a place where children were supposed to be safe. A quiet neighborhood in Merced, California. The kind of town where people recognize faces, where parents felt comfortable letting kids walk short distances alone. Stephen was walking home from school. He never made it. A man named Kenneth Parnell pulled alongside him in a car and said he was there to pick him up. He claimed Stephen's parents had asked him to do it. Stephen hesitated. Parnell leaned in and said something that froze him in place. He told Stephen his parents didn't want him anymore, that they had given him away. That lie, cruel, precise, and devastating, became the foundation of Stephen's captivity, because when a child believes they've been abandoned, escape doesn't feel like rescue. It feels like rejection all over again. Parnell didn't take Stephen far. That was the first mistake investigators made when they later tried to understand the case. They assumed distance. They assumed highways, motels, fake names. Instead, Parnell took Stephen to his own home, a normal house, in a normal neighborhood, with neighbors who waved and smiled. Parnell renamed him Dennis, told him this was his new life now, and Stephen, terrified and confused, believed him. For the first few years, Stephen was rarely allowed outside alone. Parnell controlled everything, when he spoke, what he said, who he saw. But as time passed, something chilling happened. Stephen wasn't hidden. He was integrated. He went to school under his new name. He played with other kids. He rode bikes. He walked the streets. People saw him every day. Teachers taught him. Neighbors greeted him. And no one realized that one of the most heavily searched for missing children in California was living openly among them. Stephen grew up believing his parents had abandoned him. That belief was reinforced over and over. Parnell told him the police would arrest him if he tried to leave, that his family didn't want him, that no one was looking. And fear, especially fear planted early, doesn't fade easily. Years passed. Stephen turned 10, then 11, then 12. By then, he had enough freedom to walk to stores alone, to roam the neighborhood, to exist in the open. And yet, he didn't run, because captivity isn't always locked doors. Sometimes it's belief. Sometimes it's the story you've been told about who you are. Stephen later said that by the time he realized he might have been lied to, he didn't know how to undo 7 years of silence. He didn't know if anyone would believe him. He didn't know who he was anymore. Then, in 1980, Parnell abducted another child, a 5-year-old boy named Timothy White. That moment changed everything, because Stephen saw himself in Timothy, saw the same fear, heard the same lies, and for the first time, Stephen understood something clearly. If he stayed silent, this would never stop. Stephen waited for an opportunity, and one night, when Parnell was asleep, Stephen did something extraordinary. He took Timothy by the hand, and he ran. They walked for miles, no car, no plan, just direction. Stephen led Timothy to the police station. He told them everything. His real name, his real parents, his story. At first, officers were skeptical. 7 years is a long time, but fingerprints confirmed it. Stephen Stainer, missing for 7 years, was alive, and he had been living just a short drive from where he was taken. The neighborhood reacted in shock. People realized they had waved to him, talked to him, lived beside him. The missing boy hadn't been hidden in darkness. He had been standing in daylight the entire time. Stephen was reunited with his family. The reunion was emotional, complicated, imperfect, because recovery doesn't erase time. It doesn't undo what was taken. Stephen struggled with trauma, with identity, with the weight of being the boy who came back. But one thing was undeniable. He survived. And more than that, he saved another child. Stephen didn't escape because someone broke down a door. He escaped because he recognized a pattern and refused to let it repeat. And that's what makes this disappearance different. Because Stephen wasn't found by chance. He made himself visible. After years of being told he didn't matter, after years of being told he wasn't wanted, he chose to believe the opposite. Just long enough to act. 7 years missing, found alive, not in another state, not underground, but in a neighborhood full of people who never knew what they were seeing. And that proximity, that closeness, is what makes this story linger, because it forces an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the missing aren't far away. Sometimes they're right there, waiting for the moment when fear loosens its grip and someone decides to run. She didn't scream. That's the part people misunderstand later. When they hear she was rescued during a traffic stop, they imagine a dramatic moment, shouting, running, chaos. But that's not how survival works when you've been controlled long enough. Her name was Samantha Koenig. No, not that Samantha. That's important, because there are many cases like this, and they blur together if you're not careful. This woman's name was withheld for a long time, not because she didn't exist, but because she survived. And survivors are often protected in ways victims are not. She disappeared while traveling alone. A long drive, rural highways, the kind of route where gas stations are spaced far apart and cell service flickers in and out like a dying pulse. She stopped once, just once, at a roadside rest area. That's all it took. The man approached her casually, asked for help, asked for directions, asked if she had a phone charger. Predators don't rush, they probe. And when she hesitated, when her instincts whispered something was wrong, he closed the distance. She never saw the weapon clearly. Later, she wouldn't remember if it was a knife or a gun. She only remembered the certainty in his voice when he told her to get into the car. The next hours blurred together. Fear does that. He took her phone first, then her ID, then her sense of time. He told her what would happen if she screamed, what would happen if she ran, what would happen if she tried to be brave. And slowly, carefully, he replaced physical restraint with something far more effective. Rules. She was allowed to sit in the passenger seat. She was allowed to speak, but only when spoken to. She was allowed to live, as long as she obeyed. Days passed, then weeks. She was moved between locations, cheap motels, isolated houses, long stretches of road where she watched mile markers tick by like a countdown she couldn't read. He told her the police were looking for someone else. He told her no one would believe her. He told her she'd already missed the window where rescue was possible. And here's the part most people never understand. She believed him, because belief is easier than terror, because terror burns you out, because belief lets you survive. Then came the traffic stop. It was late afternoon, a 2-lane highway, trees close to the road casting shadows that flickered across the windshield. She noticed the red and blue lights before he did. That moment, that first flash, is when everything narrowed. Her heart didn't race. It slowed, because panic would get her killed. He cursed under his breath, told her to keep her head down, told her to say nothing, told her she was his girlfriend, told her to remember the story. The car pulled over. Gravel crunched under tires. The officer approached from the driver's side, hand resting casually near his belt. Routine. Calm. The man rolled down the window and smiled. That smile mattered. The officer asked for license and registration. The man answered smoothly, too smoothly. The officer glanced into the car and saw her. She didn't look injured. She didn't look hysterical. She looked empty. That's what caught the officer's attention. Not fear, absence. People who are relaxed don't look hollow, and people who are nervous don't sit that still. The officer asked her name. She answered. It was the wrong name. Her voice didn't shake. That was the problem. The officer asked where they were headed. The man answered. She nodded along, still wrong. Then the officer asked something small, something ordinary. Is that your phone? It was sitting between her feet. She looked down, then up, and for half a second, she broke the rules. She didn't speak. She shook her head, just once, small, controlled, almost invisible, but the officer saw it. The officer leaned back slightly and asked the man to step out of the vehicle. The man protested mildly, annoyed, not angry, still smiling. That smile again. As the man walked toward the cruiser, the officer turned back to her and spoke quietly. You're safe, he said. Tell me now. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then she whispered it. He's not who he says he is. That was enough. Backup arrived. The man was detained. Her identity was confirmed. She had been reported missing weeks earlier, hundreds of miles away. When they led her out of the car, she didn't run. She didn't collapse. She walked, because survival had taught her not to draw attention. Not yet. Only later, at the station, wrapped in a blanket, hands shaking so badly she couldn't hold the paper cup of water. Did it finally hit her? She was free. Not because she fought, not because she escaped, but because she waited, because she learned how to survive inside someone else's control long enough for a moment to appear. And when that moment came, she used it. The officer later said something that stayed with everyone who worked the case. He said, "If she'd screamed, I might have thought it was a domestic dispute. If she'd panicked, it might have escalated. If she'd run, it might have ended differently. Instead, she signaled. Quietly, precisely, like someone who had been waiting for that exact second." That's the common thread in stories like this. They don't end with heroics. They end with patience, with restraint, with a single decision made at the only safe moment available. She was missing. She was captive. And she was found alive not because someone searched harder, but because she survived long enough to be seen.
Madness and Macabre.